All right, welcome back to another tier list. There hasn't been a tier list in a long hacking time and a lot of things have happened. First and foremost, we now have 4 new heroes. And second of all, recently, all gun damage was nerfed by 10%. That also affects some of these heroes quite a lot, which means we're kind of leaning slightly more back to a spirit meta because we've had a very gun meta with like Frenzy and Vampiric Burst and Lucky Shot and all that stuff. So it's looking to get a little bit more balanced now, but I just wanted to start with that. We're going to start with Abrams. So Abrams is a hero that hasn't really been changed a lot in the recent patches. I think they are pretty happy with where he is at. He is a very strong laner. His passive isn't as strong anymore as it used to be, and definitely not compared to Shiv's passive, but he makes up for that with a stun ult that also makes him unstoppable when it's maxed out. It's great for mid-boss deals. It's great for team fights. His shoulder charge guarantees a heavy melee, which is why every Abrams player pretty much plays melee. His gun damage took a little hit recently with the patch of 10%. I don't think that affects Abrams as much as other heroes, but I do believe that Abrams belongs in the very top of A tier. He's been a very strong hero. I think he's never seen B tier ever. He's always been S or A, and he stays that way. He's just very good. All right, next up we have Bebop. Bebop has recently got nerfed. They nerfed the uppercut weapon damage. They nerfed the hook weapon damage, and he also took a 10% gun damage nerf. A few months ago, a lot of you criticized me for putting him very far down, and that was slightly also because I was very frustrated with playing Bebop, but I decided to give him another go and started spamming him in ranked again, and now I'm almost Infernus, and I've pretty much only been playing bomb and some gun. And I do realize that I was wrong. He was never D tier. He gets a lot of hate all the time. I do not think he's as strong as, like, let's say Paradox, but I do realize that Bebop is pretty strong just because of the pick potential. And now that I've gotten much better at playing him, I also see the potential in how much you can be a playmaker. Of course, the gun build is much weaker than it used to be, which is okay because I feel like there should be more balance between how strong the gun and the spirit builds are, because gun has always been his strongest build and I still think it is. But I'm gonna put him at the top of B tier. I think before the gun damage nerf, I would put him in A- or maybe A. But I think the gun damage nerf hurts Bebop more than other heroes because he kind of relies on having this like really small DPS window from when he uppercuts them and hits the perfect tracking. And then after he's done with that, he feels really awkward to fight with because you have to charge up the beam. It's not easy to just 1v1 with unless you hit the uppercut and the hook, and everything after feels a little bit awkward. Next up, we have Dynamo. I've always put Dynamo in S tier because he just has the best ult in the game. It's an ult that is like absolutely game winning. But recently, one thing that's been pretty interesting is that he's been picked a lot less in tournaments and also a lot less in ranked. One nerf that he's been constantly getting is longer and longer cooldowns on his ult. And as the meta progresses, people are getting better and better at playing around that. So instead of like forcing team fights when he has ult up, you split push instead. And you kind of like Dynamo doesn't do that much unless he has his ult. Don't get me wrong. The ult is insane, but it's kind of similar to how Bebop works. Is like if you don't get a good hook, you don't have any value, and the same goes with Dynamo. If you don't hit a good ult, you don't have much value. So I'm demoting him to A tier. I used to always put him in S tier, but I've noticed that even a lot of these teams that are playing competitive tournaments, they just stopped picking Dynamo. There are a lot of other good heroes with good teamfight ults that are much easier to hit as well. There's also a lot of counter items. You can put a knockdown on him or even unstoppable. So I just think that Dynamo was insane in the beginning before more people understood how to play the map, because the typical thing for a game like this is that as soon as it comes out, you play it very like shooter oriented, and then you kind of transition into a MOBA playstyle over time. And I think that hurts Dynamo as people get better at split pushing and not giving him beneficial situations to use his ult in. All right, next up we have Grey Talon. Grey Talon has gone through a plethora of changes up and down, spirit scaling for fire rate, spirit scaling for running speed, extra stamina, bullet velocity up and down, The only thing that's been consistent is pretty much his ult that always gives him 5 spirit when someone dies within 3 seconds of the owl. He has some of the highest burst damage in game, but he's also one of the easiest heroes to run over. If you buy knockdown, he's pretty toast. He can be pretty scary in the laning stage, but Great Talon doesn't feel that great. I feel like Great Talon he wants to be this awesome bow and arrow assassin so bad, but he's just so much worse than Vindicta at doing that. And I believe he is the worst hero in the game right now at C tier. All right, next up we have Haze. Haze has pretty much been one of the most popular heroes in the entire game for the last 6 months. She has had a lot of changes. The biggest change to Haze was when the ult no longer hit 2 targets. That really altered the way you would play Haze. There used to be a lot of like specific ult builds. Now Haze is more common to be played around like a mouse 1 type of deal, either with like fleet foot and stuff, a lucky shot, even some spirit, because now the ult also has spirit damage and spirit scaling. So there's some more options with playstyles now with Haze. She definitely feels less frustrating to play against because it doesn't feel like just like a press to win button anymore. And I've also been trying to take into consideration how much the competitive teams in tournaments pick these different heroes to get a better idea of why some heroes are played a lot and some heroes are not. And I just don't think that Haze is that great. I feel like a lot of the time in normal games too, whenever there's a Haze on my team, she doesn't get to do the thing she wants to do, which is farm 60k souls and then take over the game. And I don't know, I think Haze is honestly B-. I am not a huge fan. Like the ult isn't the same anymore. If you get slightly behind of souls, anyone can destroy you. You can get 2-shot by an Abrams who shoulder charges you. Metal skin counters her ult. I think that she has very little utility other than a sleep dart. And there are just other carries that just does a lot more than Haze does. Another thing is also that Haze took a hit from the 10% gun damage reduction. Now I want to specify that it doesn't necessarily hurt Haze as much as some other heroes, because a lot of Haze's damage comes from fixate, which means that fire rate and fixate still gonna do a lot of damage. But in a lot of cases, like David points out, Haze is a pub stomper. If you are on a smurf, then Haze is one of the best heroes to play. If you feel like you're a better player than everybody else in the lobby. All right, next up we have Infernus. Infernus, I think, is pretty good. I've been playing a lot with Moose recently. He's a very good Infernus player and seeing how he manages the map. Infernus is also one of the carries who was impacted the least of the gun damage nerfs because most of his damage is spirit. So I think this is a pretty good meta to play Infernus. The rapid recharge on his dash that came a while ago just made him a lot stronger. And yeah, I think he's pretty damn good right now. I'm gonna put him in A-. I think Infernus is probably one of the best pure carries right now. He still needs a lot of farm. He has an ult that can also steal mid-boss, which is pretty sick. Also, bonus points in my book is also, I think Infernus is one of the coolest and most complete like hero designs. Like him and Kelvin are like, you know, fire and ice. All their abilities are very cool. The voice lines are cool. The lore is cool. I think it's like one of the coolest heroes in general. I don't think he's quite up there in S and A tier because there are a lot of specific scenarios where you just get cooked playing those heroes too. But I definitely think that if you want to be like a one trick on like a carry hero, I think this is a pretty good meta to play a lot of Infernus. All right, next up we have Ivy. Ivy is a hero that I put in S tier a lot in the past because first of all, she is still the only hero, actually her and Viscous are the only 2 heroes who can transport the urn without the movement speed limitation. So they recently put in a movement speed limitation on the urn delivery where you cannot run faster than 13 meters per second. But when Viscous ults and when Ivy ults and carries the urn herself, it doesn't apply to them. And this bug has been in the game for so long that I don't know if we can even call it a bug anymore. And it's just like such an important way of like, especially if you're playing from behind, like as soon as Ivy's flying, you can almost guarantee that urn is delivered. So that makes Ivy incredibly strong. I do think that like the power level has kind of gone up a bit. So I don't think she belongs in S tier anymore, but I still think she belongs very high up in A tier. There's just so many ways of playing Ivy. You can play Spirit build with escalating exposure, Mystic slow, a reach and all that, and bomb and silence everybody. You can play gun, and her gun scales very well into late game. She's only weak very early on. Or you can play support. You can carry the urn. You can healing beam people out of trouble. I think she's really strong. Next up, we have Kelvin. Kelvin is another hero that is mostly played as a support now. A beam build was very strong in the past. His ult is incredibly strong for... You can guarantee urn deliveries with the ult. You can save walkers because it freezes objectives. It almost guarantees that you win the mid-boss crystal too, because you can charge up a heavy melee and then drop your dome to hit the perfectly timed melee because it freezes the crystal while in the dome. So Kelvin is a hero that really gets stronger if your team is better at playing as a team. So that's why he's picked a lot in like competitive tournaments, but that's also why he's kind of hard to play in solo queue. I would not recommend him in solo queue in most cases, because it's really hard to solo carry with him. There's been a lot of builds in the past. There was a period where gun Kelvin was really strong. Beam Kelvin was... The beam even disarmed at one point way back, which was crazy. But right now, he's just a really good support. He can rotate a lot. He can ice path and then rescue beam people out of trouble. And his frost grenades heal. He's overall a pretty good support. I'm going to put him in A- just because I still think that he's a little bit difficult, especially in solo queue. And it's a little bit harder to come online unless you have a team that plays around what you do. Like, it's really hard to just like solo kill someone unless you go weapon items and you trap someone in your dome. Okay, next up we have Lady Geist. Lady Geist got a pretty big change recently. There's been a lot of controversy around her. There was a bug in the game where the item Mystic Reverb would cause... When you got a killing blow with Mystic Reverb, it would actually do double damage. So people would put Mystic Reverb on her ult, and then the explosion would do double damage. You could do like 3,000 damage to people with it. That's been patched finally. It was in a game for a lot of months, but not a lot of people knew about it, so it wasn't really played that much. They recently changed her kit quite a bit. Her life drain used to silence. Now they gave it charges instead, so you can have a lot of charges and you can life drain many different people. And instead, they removed the silence from the drain and gave her an AoE silence on the ult. So that basically means that when you are ulting someone, they cannot use abilities to get away or anything, which means that the ult is pretty much a guaranteed kill. I think Geist is also a decent pub stomper. She's very tanky and she can like trick you too. Like, you can almost be like a really bad Geist player, but then just get away with it because the ult swap is such a good way of like, you know, you can like trick people into engaging hard on you. But I don't think she's that great. I think she had a lot more assassin potential with the old, like when she had silence on her life drain. I think that was better for her because she could just warp stone in and silence someone and start nuking them. And now it's kind of only connected to her ult, which is a pretty long cooldown. So I'm going to put her in B tier. Next up, we have Lash. Lash is another hero that he has a very, very game-winning ultimate. He is actually picked in competitive tournaments quite a bit because he can traverse the map very fast. That makes him a decent split pusher. He's one of those heroes that has a very high skill cap, and the better movement you have, the more you can take advantage of this hero. And they recently changed it so that his ult does a 1-second stun when they land on the ground, but it also increased the cooldown on his ult quite a bit. So this kind of moves him like to a more like mini Dynamo kind of playstyle. Not like the same by any means, but it used to be pretty easy to dodge Lash's ult. Basically now you can only dodge Lash's ult before you get picked up, because once that ult is maxed, you'll get stunned for 1 second. And that 1 second stun is very brutal because it guarantees that your ground slam will hit after. It also guarantees that you can silence glyph all the targets because they get grouped up after, which is why a lot of Lash players now buy silence glyph as well. So I think he's in a pretty good spot. I think he belongs in A-, right up here. Also a hero that is very cool. Like he's just very cool in general. The Lash lore is pretty sick. If you guys haven't checked the Lash lore page, I recommend searching it up. Okay, speaking of heroes that are overpowered, McGinnis. McGinnis seems like she's in a weird spot to me. There was a period a while ago where her ult build was very strong, and then they completely nerfed the turrets. So spirit builds weren't that normal anymore. Her gun build has always been fine, but gun builds are a lot easier to counter, especially with the now 10% gun damage nerf too. I don't think McGinnis is in a great spot right now. I think she's like, if you can't find a Kelvin or Ivy or Dynamo support, you kind of pick McGinnis because you don't have anything better to do. Her wall is definitely the strongest part of her kit and can be used pretty well in some scenarios, and she's still a pretty decent split pusher, but I don't think she's in a great spot. I think she's pretty weak now, probably in the weak ranks. I'd say I'm putting her in like B-. She's still pretty annoying to lane against. If you play against like something like McGinnis and Abrams, it's a very strong lane, but I do feel that she kind of falls off in value later into the game. All right, next up we have Mohammed and Kareel. Mystery Mo and Krill is one of those heroes that actually is picked quite a lot in competitive tournaments, because heroes like Mo and Paradox that have very strong pick potential can be really well executed in a competitive environment. They recently gave him 35%, I believe, headshot resistance on the big head, because he's the only one that can be headshot on 2 different spots, but you deal more damage to Mo by headshotting the small head compared to the big head. And I believe that Mo and Krill is very strong and has been for a long time. He feels almost impossible to kill in the laning stage. You can buy magic carpet for him and basically be unkillable. You can get tons of HP scaling from getting kills with the ult. And I think he's one of the strongest bruisers in the game. I think I'll put him right behind Abrams on A tier. And then we have Paradox. One thing that I really don't understand is how Paradox avoids getting nerfed patch after patch after patch, because she has to be the most broken hero in this game. There are other heroes recently that are pretty close, but goddamn, man, not only is her combo 100% hit chance pretty much, unless you have like super fast reactions and use like E-Shift or Warp Stone, but you don't have the travel time issue that Bebop has. You don't have the issue with like having to silence or curse them when they go through. You just pop your carbine, you run to someone, they get stunned by your carbine, you swap them into a silence with the wall, and then your team just cleans up the rest. It's almost like you should put a separate category for her compared to any other hero. I think she's absolutely busted. Not only that, there's also a double bomb Paradox build that also is incredibly strong, where the grenades do like 2,000 damage each, and because they both have amp, when they hit a target, they amp each other, and it covers like the entire mid-boss pit. So I used to think that Paradox had like a really high skill cap, and like it took really like lots of time to learn her. It's actually not that hard. As long as you have okay aim, it's fine. You just need to hit your carbine and then press 4 and 2 and make sure that your settings are an instant cast. And then you'll just ult and wall and you'll hit it every time, unless they like buy counter items. They also reduced the sound of the carbine a while ago, so you can actually get stunned and swapped outside the audio range from the carbine. So yeah, that, I don't know. Paradox is either banned or picked in almost every competitive tournament match. Right now, what's been very common is that you have like 3 heroes that are really good at getting picks. It's Paradox, it's Mo, and it's Bebop. They all have this like single target ability to pick off a hero. And when it's done in like a competitive environment where you can be like, yo guys, I'm getting ready for a hook here, I'm gonna look for a swap, you know they will instantly follow up on it. And Paradox does that better than anyone else. Her ult has a really short cooldown. The carbine, by the way, when you're once you get sharpshooter, burst fire, pristine emblem, your carbine hits for like 1200. So yeah. So she hits you for 1200, swaps you, life steals, and you get silenced through a wall and take 10% of your health and damage. Very, very, very busted hero. Next up we have Pocket. Pocket has been the bane of my existence for a very long time, not only because they can dodge the Bebop bombs, which is very annoying, just because of how slippery this hero is in general. You're almost forced to buy Slowing Hex or Silence Glyph or Curse to deal with a Pocket that's ahead in farm. Another big issue was that you could just like hit like however many people with an affliction, and you would just have to run back to base. So the way they sorted that out was that they allocated a lot of the damage from affliction to be burst damage in the beginning instead of like this very high damage over time ability. And I think that made Pocket weaker for sure. I think it's still a very good like playmaker hero, but I don't think this hero is as busted as they used to be in the very beginning. I think it's more that it's like a slippery salmon. It's very annoying to play against, and sometimes with like, it's just a hero that scales very well with active items as well. You have Warp Stone and E-Shift and Majestic Leap, and Majestic Leap is now buffed again too, which makes Pocket better again too. So I'm gonna put Pocket here because I think Pocket is like a hard hero to play for sure, and I think that in lower ranks I think Pocket isn't really a problem. But I also think that it's still like one of those playmaker heroes that has a very high skill cap, and like if you're have good movement and you played a lot of games on this hero, I think you can get away with a lot of shit, but very susceptible to like Silence Glyph and stuff. Also, this hero has minus 15% spirit resist from the get-go, and now that gun damage has been nerfed a bit, we are more likely to see more spirit damage builds in the game, and this also hurts Pocket a bit, which is also why I put them a little bit lower. So yeah. Next up, we have 7. When the game first came out, 7 had like the most ridiculous win rates and pick rates ever. In every bracket, it was just crazy all over the place. He took a bunch of heavy nerfs. A lot of builds were no longer really good. There's like an Echo Shard stun build that is pretty decent. Right now, the most popular 7 build is actually Ult 7, which is kind of fun. It's kind of back to what was like the very, very early popular build with this hero, because they added a lightning bolt to 7's ult, and he can also move around a little bit slowly in the ult, and he like bobs and weaves up and down, which gives him more survivability. So I think ult 7 is better than it's been in the past, but I will say this every single time I make these tier lists, every single time there's a 7 on my team, he steals everyone's farm, and then he's completely useless. And then maybe once after like 40 minutes, he gets this one like team kill ult with his like well-farmed money. He's got Unstoppable, Majestic Leap or Warp Stone, and Mystic Slow, Escalating Exposure, and he gets that one team wipe that makes the game last another 10 minutes. But that's like the only thing he can hope for. 7 also doesn't feel very strong in the lane because his stun is delayed. At least from like a Bebop's perspective, whenever I lane against a 7, I feel like I'm at a huge advantage because I get to do my entire combo before his stun actually hits me. So 7 to me is definitely C tier. I think his 3 build is okay, but at that point I'm just like, why don't you just pick a hero like Infernus? Because if you're going to do like a 3 build on 7, there are just other heroes that just does that a lot better. Even Haze does that better, you know? All right. Then we have Shiv. Shiv has gone a ton of nerfs over the months. He was by far the most broken hero on release, like ever. And the biggest thing that a lot of people criticize Shiv for is that his passive that makes instant damage become damage over time, and you can defer some of that damage every so often. And the fact that when he's got max rage, he does 25% more damage. So he's the only hero in the game with 2 passives. So it feels like his kit is a little bit overloaded, and his kit scales much better with mitigation items than other heroes. So that's why like Shiv with Frenzy, for instance, his effective HP is like 6,000 or whatever, because of how all these different damage absorption, damage mitigation things affect each other. So recently when the Frenzy meta was very strong, I feel like that Shiv and Yamato was definitely the 2 heroes that benefited the most out of this. And he's also a hero that is picked very often in tournaments, but I think he got slightly hurt by the 10% gun damage nerf, but not so much as some other heroes. And I'm gonna put him right up here with the other bruisers, right next to Mo on A tier. Yeah, also Shiv's execute is kind of crazy because it just resets the cooldown whenever you're maxed out. Okay, then we have Vindicta. I think Vindicta might be the strongest gun carry in the game right now. Even after the 10% nerf, she's got good projectile velocity. They lowered her projectile velocity and her movement speed a little bit, but I still think she's one of the strongest weapon carries in the game. The fact that this hero is the only hero in the game that can exponentially increase your souls gain because you last hit someone with an ult. You get an extra 600 souls on top of all the other ones. I think the ult on Vindicta doesn't belong in the game. That's my opinion. Feel free to disagree. I just don't feel like it is fair that one hero can just not farm any camps whatsoever, because whenever she gets a killing blow with her ult, she gets like souls equal to like 2 or 3 hero kills. It's a snowball. It's definitely a snowball mechanic, but it's not a snowball mechanic that I think is enjoyable. It's just one of those, when you lose lane to someone else, they're ahead of you in souls, cool. You lose lane to Vindicta and she flies up and she just snipes you from across the map. She has like twice as many souls as everybody else. And it's very common that she just like scales out of proportion because of that. So yeah, it's like a global Shiv ult. So yeah, I think Vindicta is really strong. Again, like she did get hurt by the gun damage nerfs too. But I think it's important to remember that when it's a 10% gun damage nerf across the board, it doesn't mean that one hero is like specifically a lot weaker. It just means that all the weapon damage is adjusted down. It means that you'll have a 10% more difficult time facing a spirit build as a gun build. But in reality, a lot of heroes have a very high percentage of gun damage and gun items. So it kind of just like reduces the burst damage in the game as a whole. I think Vindicta is right up here with the other guy who can execute, because these guys both basically have the same ult. They have multiple charges of an execute, except this hero can do it across the map and gets 1,000 souls for it. All good. Hehe, smile. Then we have Viscous. Viscous is a tough one for me, because on one side, I feel like when you're laning against the Viscous, it's some of the most obnoxious things to lane against ever, because you constantly get displaced by the puddle punches. His ult has a pretty low cooldown, so it feels like he can ball around every single fight. It's a very mechanically reliant hero, and he can be played as a support. You can play ball build, you can play punch build. He's very good at saving other heroes. Like the cube is super strong. The cube is also like one thing that I've noticed is that, for instance, when some teams pick these comps with like Paradox or Mo, you can have a Viscous who sits in the background and just instantly cubes whoever gets Mo ulted or whatever. You can't curse them out of the cube, you can't do anything, and the cube heals them too. It also removes debuffs. So very, very strong indeed. I do think that Viscous in lower ranks isn't the greatest. I think it's a hero kind of like Pocket, where it requires a certain amount of skill to play this hero on a high level. But I'm going to put, and that's why I'm going to put Viscous next to Pocket as well. A-. Next up, we have Warden. Warden is also a hero that is very popular in the competitive scene. He can kind of do a lot. His ult build used to be very popular with the Majestic Leap and everything. Almost nobody plays that anymore. Now it's all about the weapon damage. He runs really fast. You buy Slowing Hex and you cage someone. He's really good at like hunting down one target. He can pop his ult and destroy walkers pretty fast. He's very beefy. He has one of the highest weapon damages in the game too. Very strong laner. And it feels like a solid addition to any team. If you've seen Hydration play, he's a really good Warden player. He picks him a lot. And it's very scary to play against a Warden who's slightly ahead. It feels like you just get run down by a train. Whenever he says time to change the world, you gotta run. Yeah, he's very strong in the lane. Even his alchemical flask has a very short cooldown. You can throw it pretty far. I think I would put him next to Vindicta in the middle of A tier. I think he's great in all stages throughout the game. And then his Spirit Shield is also, I will say he also got hurt by the gun nerfs recently, but alas, here we are. All right, next up we have Wraith. Wraith recently got some controversial changes. They made her ult a little bit better, but the card's much worse. Wraith has been on a downward spiral nerf-wise ever since Shadow Weave became a weapon item. She's gotten nerfed again and again and again. And then recently her ult was changed again. She's still pretty popular in competitive tournaments, but I'm very curious to see tomorrow or at the fight night if she's picked a lot after these changes, because she does melt walkers fast and she has a TP to get away. But I do think that the card nerf was pretty bad, and I'm putting her in B tier. I think that Wraith is a pretty good solo laner still. She has a pretty decent laning stage, and she has a strong ult once she hits 3k souls. but she doesn't feel like she has the same kind of kill potential that she used to have with the old ults. So yeah, this hero has definitely had a big fall ever since, but she's still popular in competitive games. But that was, I haven't seen any tournaments since after the recent patch, so I'm curious to see if she's still valued by some of these teams. All right, then we have Yamato. Yamato to me is still one of the strongest heroes in the game. A lot of people call her the raid boss. A lot of people call her the server admin. Her ults and abilities have been redone so many times, and I just still think that there is very few heroes that I have more problems with than Yamato. I don't know. Do you guys feel the same way? Like, do you guys feel like Yamato is one of the strongest heroes in the game? Genuinely asking. Because I'm curious if it's just because of the specific heroes I play, or is like, okay, so we do agree. Because I actually want to put Yamato in S tier. I just think she is so strong. If she gets slightly ahead, she's so hard to deal with. You're forced to buy stuff like Hunter's Aura, Crippling Headshots, Silencing Glyph, or Curse. With some heroes, it's like you buy one item to counter them. With Yamato, it feels like you need to buy multiple items to counter her. And because she both heals a little bit when she pops her ult, and then when you have Heal Bane plus the heal from her ult, she can just go on a rampage. I think she's very, very strong. Then we have Mirage. Mirage is a hero that I personally have been sleeping a little bit on. The reason why I'm saying that is because there are heroes in all MOBAs that have global presence. So what this means is that some heroes have the ability to be on the opposite side of the map, create pressure, like push a walker on one side or something, and force someone to go defend the walker. And now, because of a global ultimate, you can instantly TP into the fight. This is why Mirage is very popular in tournaments, for instance, where macro play is very important. So Mirage is one of the very few heroes who creates this kind of advantage purely based off of macro that other heroes cannot. He's also arguably one of the best solo laners in the game. His passive is so annoying to deal with, and he's a very strong hero overall, and he hasn't received any nerfs recently either. I think Mirage's Tornado is one of the most overloaded basic abilities in the game. Not only can you disjoint a bunch of different projectiles with it, it's also a lift/stun. It's not technically a stun, it just lifts them up. And you have bullet evasion after the tornado. So I just think he's incredibly strong. And I'm actually putting him for the first time at the bottom of S tier. This is also based off how much I've been like trying to watch tournament recently and try to understand how they think and what makes heroes good and bad. So I feel like recently I've been trying my best to approach knowledge and watch very good players play and see what I can learn from that. I'm also just gonna, because this is also in order and this line is starting to get a little bit long, we're just gonna have Dynamo drop down here. In practice, it doesn't really mean anything in the order. It just looks a little bit more neat. All right, and then what you have all been waiting for. The 4 new heroes of Deadlock. Dropped in out of nowhere with no warning whatsoever. Where do we put them? All right, let's start with Calico. Calico, the crazy cat lady. When they first dropped her, she wasn't very strong. And then they gave her a little bit more damage on her melee strike, a little bit more range. And they also made her cat form be able to break boxes. This summoned some funny builds. I was trying to do some cat maxing, for instance, where you permanently play in the cat form. Obviously didn't work very well. And she feels like she plays best as some sort of bruiser right now. Pretty similar playstyle to Yamato, I'd say. She has a pretty good laning stage, but she definitely feels to me just like a weaker Yamato. I would also say she's arguably the weakest hero of all the new heroes. I still think she's probably the coolest. I like her design. I think she's very cool, but I don't think she's that strong. I think she's fun. She can survive for a pretty long time. Her bombs are very inconsistent. I think you would see a lot more a variety in Calico builds if her bombs were better, because right now the bombs feel a little bit all over the place. And I also think even stuff like the cat build with escalating exposure, mystic slow, all that would feel better if you could just drop out of the cat form and consistently hit your bomb. But because that's such an inconsistent way of dealing damage as of right now, I do believe that's going to change. and that her dash doesn't have any collision. So sometimes you have these awkward situations where you either dash too far or you need to like jump up and dash it downwards because it just doesn't collide. So it just feels like a dash that is much more awkward to use than, for instance, Shiv's dash, which is why I'm putting her in top of B tier. Then we have Holliday. Now I have a question. How many of you in chat have experienced getting juggled with the kegs with Holliday? Because let me tell you, her kit does so much. So let's start with the jump pad. The jump pad is like, whenever you land, you do an AoE stun. So if you mix that with like Majestic Leap or Heavy Melee Cancel or Warp Stone, you can essentially jump pad for anywhere. And you can guarantee that you hit the AoE stun on the ground, which is similar to Abrams ult. And it has multiple charges, just like the kegs, which means that you have two abilities with that gets affected by rapid recharge, just like Infernus. Except these abilities are even stronger. I am almost 100% sure that they're gonna do something to nerf the kegs, especially. I remember when she first came out, then everybody was like, oh my god, the crack shot is so broken. I think the crack shot is the least broken part of Holliday's kit. And you only have to experience getting juggled by the kegs from 100% health to 0 once to realize what I'm talking about. I do believe that they're probably going to change so you can't get knocked up by every barrel, or that the barrel knocks you in the direction based off where you're standing. So if the barrel explodes in front of you, you get knocked backwards. So you kind of just get like thrown around a little bit. But the fact that when you get hit by a barrel in close range and you just stand like this, and because of rapid recharge, you can just send out multiple barrels like that. Absolutely busted. Crackshot is definitely a good laning tool, but yeah, she's right up there. I still think, and this is the fun part, by the way. Yeah, she's not a snowball agent. She's an avalanche. That is so true. But you know what's funny? I still think Paradox is more broken, though. I'm not even kidding. Like, I still think, after all that, I still think Paradox is more broken, okay? That's the fun part. Then we have Magnificent Sinclair. Magician or Sinclair. I have a few issues with this hero. First of all, I tried playing the hero and I suck ass. So clearly the skill cap is very high on this hero. He's got slow bullets. He feels weak in the lane in the beginning, but he's got some insane burst damage. He has a hex ability that makes you like pretty much unable to use abilities, and you take like 30% increased damage. When you max out your Vexing Bolt, your copy also does a Vexing Bolt, and you can also teleport to that copy. Oh, and did I mention you can steal anyone's ultimates as well? But I actually do believe that the biggest problem with Sinclair right now actually isn't how much burst damage he does to you while you're hexed, even though that is insane. I actually believe that the biggest problem is how fast he deletes a walker, because I've seen it so many times. There's a wave at a walker, and because like the copy does full damage Vex bolts once you've maxed out your one, you literally take down a walker in like 4 seconds. And I'm not even kidding. I also want to point out, I know probably a lot of you guys check win rate percentages and stuff now. I think that's very volatile this early after releasing new heroes, because people are exploring so many different types of builds. So I would highly encourage everybody to just keep experimenting with new builds and the new heroes to see what you like, and not worry so much about which build is better or worse. I'm trying to like do this based on like having played 10 to 15 games every single day since these heroes got released. And Magician is definitely also right up there with Holliday. I will say he is tougher to play in the lane. He still has a lot of burst damage with his combo and stuff, but his gun is terrible at last hitting with. He has like the slowest bullet like speed in the game. So that it still feels a little bit awkward to lane as him until you kind of get your combo straight. And he does have a very high skill cap, but I'm putting him right behind Holliday. Mainly because of two things: his ability to just instantly delete walkers, but also his ability to do immense amount of burst damage to someone while crowd controlling them with a hex. And then we have Vyper. When Vyper was released, she had the highest DPS by far of any hero in the game. She has an ability that gives her increased slide distance, increased stamina, and increased bullet and spirit resistance while sliding. And you can slide upstairs. When you max out your poison execute thing, you also apply that when you shoot. So whenever you shoot at someone, it applies a poison that does damage based on how much health you're missing. And she has an ult that petrifies people in a large AoE, making it pretty good at stealing mid-boss. It makes it pretty good at resetting fights and stuff if you're caught in the open. Even, funny enough, when you get hooked by a Bebop, you can instantly just petrify the Bebop and run away because it's pretty much an instant cast. I think she was definitely S tier before the nerf, but she got nerfed more than any other hero. They butchered her weapon damage by a lot, and she's very, very dependent on close range. I still think she's a great hero, and I can't wait to see the next Fight Night tournament just to see what heroes are picked. I'm gonna be hosting a watch party about that on Wednesday or today when the video comes out. I think that Vyper is still up here somewhere. I think the hero was absolutely busted before the nerfs, but this hero went from, I think, 9.7 to 7 damage per bullet and the 10% gun damage nerf on top of it all. It's important to remember that she has to slide. She does feel like a slightly better gun Ivy for sure, but she has to slide. So there are a lot of heroes that can like mess you up really easily. Like she's very susceptible to get Bebop hooked unless she uses her ult. She's very susceptible to metal skin. You pretty much exclusively take bullet damage. But yeah, like I said, super, super interested in seeing how these different heroes are picked in the next Fight Night. And feel free to come hang out with me on the watch party. I guess I'll be streaming that all Wednesday. And that was my tier list. I'm sorry it's been a long break, but it's kind of been a content hiatus, not that much happening. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to leave a comment down below on what you think about the tier list, and if you agree or disagree with any hero, and also which of the new heroes do you like the most. 2025 is shaping up to be a pretty good year for Deadlock. I know it's been pretty stale for a while now. I know there's going to be a big patch coming, hopefully in the next few weeks or months. That is going to change a lot because they addressed that they're not going to do patches as often anymore, but there will be much bigger changes. So hopefully we have a very exciting future for this game as a whole, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching.